Hi, I'm Sonia Arista. I'm the healthcare CISO for Fortinet. And today, joining me is Aamir Lakhani and Derek Manky from FortiGuard Labs. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the healthcare cybersecurity threats currently facing the industry today. And to kind of get started, I always have this question of why is healthcare such a healthy, indicator? Why is it important when we're looking overall at the cyber threat landscape?
Hey Sonia, it's great to see you again, by the way. So, we've been talking about this for years, right? It's just now it's really amplified. I think it's obviously become even more critical. Healthcare has always been a target to attackers. If you look at the currency for cybercrime, right, it went from credit cards back 10, 20 years ago to EMRs, medical records, because those are often used in identity theft, which could be used for a whole bunch of matters for profit by cyber criminals. But really, what I'm seeing is a shift in that today. And unfortunately, security often takes a backseat to convenience. And if we look at healthcare providers and networks in general, you have the corporate networks, but you have the critical infrastructures, the ICUs, which everybody knows about, obviously, today. And those are ripe targets, unfortunately, to cyber criminals. There's not a lot of ethics on their ends. We're actually analyzing in FortiGuard Labs ransomware and even targeted ransom attacks that are happening with healthcare providers. And it's really unfortunate, but it is the reality of the things that we're fighting front lines with FortiGuard Labs. A year ago, I was predicting that we're going to see a rise in targeted ransom attacks, and we started to see that last year. And right now, because of the new climate, we're in this quote unquote new normal. Healthcare is in the crosshairs. So we're talking about going after critical service networks for ransom, and that's a big shift.
Yeah, Aamir, I know you do a lot of significant work looking at medical devices, which is certainly the predominant conversation we have with our customers that are large health systems. Why is there such a continuous struggle in identification of those devices, and then strategies to protect them?
Well, Sonia, I think first we need to define exactly what medical devices are, because it's a very broad term. I mean, it can include like diabetes machines, pacemakers, ventilators, even automated prescription services, and communication networks that are, specifically for first responders. And all those are at risk. I think they're at risk because they're really complex devices. Healthcare has always been a very interesting vertical because, the number one priority is patient care. And that's before convenience, that's before cybersecurity, that's before anything else that we don't want to compromise patient care. So a lot of times, when we have the ability to do red teaming, the ability to do segmentation, the ability to put in access controls, we don't do that, or we don't always have the ability to do that with medical devices, just because we never want to compromise access to patient care, which makes it difficult. Obviously, with the landscape that we have going on today, it also means we have a very, very large threat landscape and a good opportunity for attackers to experiment, and also a good opportunity for attackers, as Derek said, to not use the best ethics and go after already an overburdened system. And so as new devices come online, as hospitals and other healthcare industries are continuously and rapidly, deploying new services, they may not always be following the flow of securing those devices or even testing those devices as normally as they would. And let's face it. I mean, right now, everyone's on top of everyone's mind is let's get patient care out first.
Yeah, absolutely. So we hear from our customers that, research has always had a healthy economic basis for development for medical devices for very altruistic reasons. But now some non-traditional manufacturers are jumping in the game with development of, ventilators and things that are needed right now, and distributing directly to hospitals. What do you foresee might be the risk in that, or what are some things that maybe some cybersecurity professionals should be aware of that are trying to protect those environments that are that rapidly changing at the moment?
Well, I think the good thing is like a lot of these vendors that we're hearing about that are jumping in and providing some relief. They're getting a lot of guidance from a lot of different places, from government entities as well as other other vendors as well. But once again, they're not used to providing all following all the regulatory compliance issues as well as just in-field experience on how to secure some of these devices. I think at the same time, we are seeing these companies that have worked in other industries very good at security, so they're bringing some of their knowledge into the healthcare industry as well, which is a nice little trade-off that people are learning from each other. But I think we have not really hit the top of the curve from, as we say, from healthcare devices on what the possible risks are going to be, because there's just so many players in there right now. And unfortunately, we're not at a point where we can stop and take a step back and pen test or red team some of these devices to see what the true vulnerabilities that exist on these devices are.
Yes, that's a really good point. So
yeah,
traditional security controls like firewall, security policy, implementation, segmentation, all of the things that we typically talk about, right now is not a great time to make changes to your production environment. You really have to kind of support that those policies are in place and that you have them set in an automated fashion. So Derek, one of the things that I was going to ask you, FortiGuard ingests telemetry data from millions of devices daily. As it relates to healthcare, I mean, do you see any kind of indicators or trends that are kind of interesting in terms of the healthcare vertical being a little bit different from garden variety cyber threats?
Yeah, so generally, in general, we are seeing more volume in the threat landscape, and healthcare is no exception. Mostly what we're seeing is ransomware. So this is the biggest flavor of attack that's hitting healthcare. We obviously see ransomware in other verticals. Obviously ransomware has been dominant for like 10 years or so or more. But again, the specific flavors of ransomware that we're seeing are quite unique in healthcare because it's more of a targeted nature and spear phishing that's happening into these environments. Obviously doing things like impersonations of other health officials. That's what we're seeing. That's the main difference because, like I said, they are prime attack opportunities. And it's interesting because usually attackers go after the low-hanging fruit. And when they're going after the low-hanging fruit, they go after things like open vulnerabilities that haven't been patched for like 3 or 4 years. So Aamir was just talking about the concern for the you're talking about the medical device hole there that we're probably going to start to see an uptick in attack activity. But the reality is right now, because people are so vulnerable, that the low-hanging fruit is now turning to people instead of just casting a wide attack against vulnerabilities. And that's what we're seeing is that we talked about this in a blog, I think, earlier in the month, is that we're seeing virus activity go up to 131% year over year in March. And that's because these are a lot more attachments that are happening and email campaigns that are going out. And again, healthcare is being targeted that way.
We do hear from a large part of our customer base, but specifically academic medical centers or large health systems. There's continuously a balance of having respect for the people at the front lines and giving them the availability on their downtime to go to websites and check their emails. On the flip side of that, there's also some risk, and particularly now when you see kind of embedded threats in supposedly under the auspices of updated COVID mapping or heat maps that actually have embedded software in them. You're always kind of running the balance of trying to make allowances for your staff and the clinicians, and then also kind of throttle back knowing the threats and vulnerabilities that are targeting the environment.
Yeah, and these problems are real. We talk about supply chain security. This is in the world of IoT. It's been a huge problem in the world of IoT for years, but now in the world of IOMT, as you guys were talking about, the Internet of Medical Things, devices that are connected. A, you have the software hardware flaws that could be introduced, but B, to your point, Sonia, you have a lot of these pop-up environments that are happening just because of the emergency nature that's out there, and so that's it's really the perfect storm for attackers.
Right. As you know, we have a healthcare advisory board that kind of gets us a really close ear to the ground on what people are going to be investing in, what's top of thinking. I was really surprised this last year to hear that honeypots and insider threat pursuits were going to be sort of on the top of the list in terms of investments. That may have changed now. I think a lot of people are thinking about their incident response planning. But as we think about, things like insider threat hunting or adversarial hunting, Aamir, what do you think is going to be, has anything surprised you coming from all of the people that you've spoken to about kind of what investments are going to be made or what's going to be trending next within the healthcare spectrum?
Right, we definitely see an investment in what we call deceptive security technologies, such as honeypots. FortiDeceptor is a good example of that. And I think I almost look at insider honeypots as like landmines, like early warning detection systems. I normally put them on networks that really no one should be accessing, no one should be scanning. So when they do go off, there's something weird going on the network. Hey, why is someone scanning like an Nmap scan on this network segment? So it gives, I think it's a great way for organizations, any organization, to really figure out if something weird is going on inside their network. And a lot of people are worried about insider threats. We are seeing a majority of attacks, especially in the healthcare industry, come from the inside. But also, don't forget, a lot of even remote hackers or attackers, when they get in, they're still masquerading as inside users because they're pretty much landing and expanding, and that's where they're doing most of their damage. So insider threats, a big deal, obviously, but deceptive networks like honeypots are definitely a good early warning system to mitigate a little bit of that risk.
Yeah, I know Fortinet invests heavily in being involved with national and international healthcare IT consortiums and organizations. Derek, do you think that is, hitting the mark in terms of kind of collective intelligence? I know that the collective intelligence within your, the cyber, the organizations that are contributing to the FortiGuard Labs intelligence, that's highly, sophisticated, molded over time. Do you think healthcare is really meeting the mark there, or do they still have a little bit to go in terms of coordination of intelligence and threat data?
I'd like to set the bar high. I always like to think we can always do a better job. So that would be my first answer to that. I think there is a lot more room to go. With that said, though, obviously there is a silver lining behind all this that it's really bringing this to attention, right? And I think that it's a good time really to get this right. So yeah, of course, we are in collaboration. We work with the Cyber Threat Alliance as an example, just studying threats. So we actually have working groups on COVID-19 scams. We're doing our own FortiGuard Labs research on COVID-19 scams, following the threat landscape. When it comes to remediation, mitigation, and consulting and advice, of course, that's where things like our advisory board obviously come in, Sonia. That's where other collaborations that we're doing, working with even the World Health Organization as an example. So it's good because more stakeholders are being brought to the table now. It's absolutely what we need to do. We just need to keep doing it with more cadence. And I can tell you that's happening. I mean, I've never been busier working from home here with so many calls because because there are more stakeholders, being brought to the table, which is good. There's a lot of challenges. We talked about the threat landscape, but there's also the fact that within healthcare, there's a lot of legacy systems that are out there. Old mainframes, systems that have old vulnerabilities that need to be addressed, and we're also seeing that on the threat landscape. So there's the old and there's the new, and both of those are really converging together. But yeah, there's more room to grow as always, but the good news is people are answering the call.
Yeah, I will add, from a threat hunting standpoint, as a threat hunter, I've never seen it where different groups and different organizations, especially in healthcare, are getting together and sharing information and being more active about it than they ever have before. So that's pretty amazing. I mean, if you look at like any of the threat hunting groups, if you look at Twitter, if you look at any of the groups out there, everyone's like eager to share information because they want to make sure everyone's protected and everyone has an easier time protecting against anything possibly unseen, or no one wants to get surprised this time.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that municipalities and local governments are being more proactive in getting those groups together. Certainly in my experience as the CISO of a medical center in inner city Boston, we met regularly with our local law enforcement to share with other hospitals in the space what we were seeing at any given point in time. And that was incredibly helpful just to kind of keep tabs on where you were in relation to, to some of the others of your peers in the same industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing indeed. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you both for joining us today.
It's great to chat. I look forward to our next chat.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.